Hi everyone, and welcome to a new episode of New Product Innovation. I'm Saif Abdelghani, Product Innovation Expert, podcaster, and PDMA Egypt Chapter Leader. Welcome everyone to a new episode of New Product Innovation. Today we have a dear guest, Andrea Bergamini, the Category Director for the Wellbeing product line for Electrolux Europe. Andrea, welcome to the new episode of New Product Innovation. This is the first time we're hosting these episodes in English, so I'm very much happy and excited to record the first episode with you. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Saif. It's really an honor for me to be part of it. I'm really excited, and also the topic is really excited. So looking really forward to this time together.
Thanks a lot, Andrea. So we are discussing more about new product innovations, and one of the key things we have been seeing so far across the last few years is that there are lots of key pitfalls that endanger product innovation. And if you wanted to summarize more into 5 or 6 points, what are the 5 to 6 key pitfalls that endanger product innovation to support also our listeners to understand how can they take care of these points and make sure that this doesn't happen during the regular innovation development projects they're running?
Yeah, I think this is really interesting. As you said, recently we have seen that, especially in the latest times we're living in, that's really important to have a very clear and sleek product innovation process. And of course, there are some hiccups that can happen during the process and during for the projects. And based on the experience I had so far, let's say what I can think, especially in the start, I would say that the moment we do a brief, the moment we start the project, even before the starting of the project, I think it's really important to have in mind why we're doing that. So to me, the first pitfall is clearly not starting from the consumer, but maybe starting more from internal needs. So you always need to have the consumer in mind, because at the end of the day, this is what will make or break your project and your whole process of delivering that project that you're after.
That's a key important point. But how would you say that looking at more the consumer that this is something we can start with?
And yeah, here I think it's really important to listen to our consumers. And actually, the most important thing sometimes is remember that we are also consumers. So depending on the project you are on, whether it's a product or a service or a software, you really need to think with the eyes on the consumer in mind. And um, we want to know, or let's say we know as managers, as a company, depending on the strategy we're after, we want to know what kind of consumer experience we want to deliver. Hence, that's where we want to start. The way to do it's sometimes it's just listening to our consumers, using the marketing resources we have, use the consumer research we have, and maybe conducting focus group. Really try to understand what is the consumer trying to solve with your product or your service. Why are they hiring you or your product to solve their issues or to make their life better? That's kind of the guiding light that should be always be there under every project we start.
So we can say it's more about seeing what are the pains that the consumers are having and trying to reflect that. So to solve that kind of consumer pain points, what the consumer is trying to achieve and trying to have that as the center point before we start even thinking about developing a new product, because it all starts with the consumer at the end of the day.
Yes, it all starts with the consumer, and it all starts on how great can make the consumer experience. I mean, you as a company, you have a target in mind. You know what is your role in the competitive environment, and what is the positive feeling you want to associate yourself with the consumers. And hence the question is always, how is this project, this product or service making me closer to where I want to be, to the company or the project or the product that I want to be. To me, this is key. And if you don't have that at the beginning of each project that you're doing, I really see difficulties in making it successful, to be honest, because it becomes some sort of technical gap filling, which maybe it's not relevant for the consumer. It may be relevant for some internal policies somehow, and then at the end it will not fly.
Yeah, exactly. So it's more about finding a problem to solve rather than having a solution and finding a problem for that solution to work on.
Yeah, exactly, and also make the experience better. Sometimes it's not only about the problem. Maybe it's just about making some process of your daily life better and more enjoyable. Maybe it's not about solving problems, but how can you make the life of our consumers better? That's another angle to look at, maybe.
Exactly, exactly. So if we move from that kind of consumer centricity point as one of the key pitfalls that starts with the projects and the development, how does that flow into the process of the product development until the launch? What would be the second key pitfall that product managers and product innovator experts have to take care of, not to do, in order to make sure that their product innovation streamline is working effectively?
Yeah, and in here I really believe that your project, your product, will be as good as the time you spent in aligning on the requirements before. To me, that's another key point. So the moment you have understood why your consumers, what is it your consumers are looking for, and how you think you can improve your consumer's life, the second step is clearly to bring this into the project brief. So it's clear requirements, clear moments and definitions of what the consumer wants, and clear alignment with the whole project team. This is very important. Unfortunately, I have to say that sometimes I've seen that this moment, despite it's very key, is not taken with the right attention. Sometimes we are filled with procedures and checkpoints or milestones we need to tick, but we don't give enough attention on how important the preparation phase is. Um, I can think about watering a tree. You plant the tree, and the more time you spend about where am I planting it, what am I going to do with this tree once it's grown, what is the purpose? Does it have to give shadow? Does it have to give fruit? Is it just for design? Or the more you spend there, and you start planting the tree, and then your tree grows. At the beginning it's very small, so it's still easy to adjust, but once it's a big one, then there's not much you can do. So it's really important to focus on the beginning of the requirements and aligning with the whole project team on what are we here to do.
No, that's very very clear. I think this is the very key point that if the requirements are not really clear from the beginning, then questions and doubts and assumptions also get started from different stakeholders, which would lead to massive changes across the way to bring the project or the product to the key vision that was started with, but was not clearly communicated or wasn't thought through enough. I think this is
Yeah,
a very key point. So
and
we
here.
start, yeah.
Yeah, so sorry, but here I think it's if you are the project responsible, or let's say the person driving the project team, here it's really important that you ask the right questions. Or I mean, they don't necessarily need to be the right ones, but just ask questions. I mean, make sure everyone is aligned. Read the room. I've seen many times that people, especially now that we work mix remotely, it's easy for people not to ask questions, or maybe not to turn on the camera when you are on a meeting, or maybe be silent. Or so it's more difficult to read the room because you miss these connections that you see in people's faces and the way they move if they haven't understood something. So you, as a project leader, or let's say a part of the steering organization of the project, you need to ask the right questions all the time. Make sure that everyone is aligned. Read the room. Keep the interest in high, because that's something that you have few meetings and few moments of alignment on the requirements, and if you miss those key points, then the ball starts rolling. And we all know that we all work in this environment. We all know how difficult it is to change the direction of this ball once we start moving the organization towards something.
No, that's very very clear. I think this is a very key point, and The problem is that when mistakes happen in that area, it becomes quite costly from resources, from money perspective, even to change
Absolutely.
anything going forward. I fully agree with you on this one. So we started with the consumer centricity, enhancing the experience and making sure that the consumer is at the center of the thinking at the beginning. And then it becomes moving to a very clear requirements to deliver that kind of experience. But then what happens? What's
Yeah.
the gonna be the next key pitfall that happens in the innovation streamline?
Yeah, and I'm laughing because I can definitely relate. I mean, even though you spend a lot of time aligning, you know your consumers very well, you've done your homework. I mean, and then we kind of all face the moment of the cost, right? So we have something in mind. We as product managers or category managers, we really understand what we want for our consumers, and then we kind of link it to the real world, and we have the cost. Um, and another key point to me is really to take the hard discussions on the cost well in advance in the process. Um, Cost definition, it will be really important for you, and the cost of your products will impact how successful the product is. It doesn't necessarily need to be a low cost, rest assured, but it has to be the right cost. So to me, it's really important also to start early in the process in aligning on what are the expectations on the cost of a project, and avoid easy optimism. Now, sometimes we always been in those meetings where like, oh, we can do this for our consumers, and on the other side, yeah, of course, we will find the solution with the supplier, we will find a better process, but then we don't have plans behind, and then the reality kicks in, and you need to make changes along the way, which are always a bit tricky to do, right?
Yeah, I fully agree with you. I think being very much optimistic at the start and just wanting to kick off without clear understanding of the risks and clear understanding of the situation we're in gets people very excited that you start with a certain optimism with a cost level and certain profitability and end up before the launch with a massive issue that this was not aligned and the resources were not allocated enough to work on the things that should have delivered that kind of expectation from the start, or the start actually was not really realistic.
Yeah, and actually, once you are in this situation, when the cost is in, and once the cost has gone up, or let's say it's gone in a different direction versus what you thought, then we all know it's very difficult to make it to change it, because, as we said before, the ball is rolling and the organization is rolling. So once everything is moving already, it's difficult to stop and reassess. And and since this can most likely not happen, you are left with either to cancel the project and start all over again, which of course it's not desirable, or you need to start compromising. Either you compromise on the profit for your organization, or you compromise on the consumer experience. And to be fair, in both cases, this leads to a failure. Either you will have a non-satisfying project from a financial point of view, or you will not meet your consumer expectations. Hence, it will not be a successful project once it hits the market. So this is really, I mean, this is super key that you align beforehand. But also, I would say, keep a reiteration with your project team. Keep it agile. I mean, make be best friend with your controllers, best friend with your R&D team, so that you're always there when something is not going in the right direction. So you can always have the right time to steer and align before it really hits the project itself, and it becomes a problem that it's too difficult to overcome.
No, I fully agree with you, and this goes back again to the clear requirements part because I think if we know
Absolutely.
that this is something that is not achievable, then we have to work again on the requirements to make sure that we are not either over complicating things and over adding things that may not actually deliver more on the experience part and we're just adding ad hooks, or we are actually underestimating our own requirements and maybe we need to go back again to the drawing board. So I think keeping the agile part is as you mentioned is critical because at that stage during the project when it's that early it's easy to do some changes and iterations. But once in this kind of heavy, in some of the indices that are heavy indices, including machinery and tools worth of millions of dollars, if these things are not clear before we start investing and creating the tools and the machinery, it will become massively costly to change over, and then becomes not just a failure in terms of profitability, but also a failed investment.
Yeah, and then you will end up having something which is not either good for the company or good for the consumers, which are both equally bad, I would say.
No, you're 100% right. I think also in these kind of conditions where costs are going up in crazy ways because of the changes and the economic situation, also this becomes key and very critical when developing any new product.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we moved from the start of the consumer centricity, then to the clear requirements, then understanding the cost level that would deliver this kind of experience to the consumer, and making sure that this is key planning part. Then what comes afterwards?
I'm very related to the cost. It's I think, I mean, the other side of the cost is quality, right? So um, quality has a cost in the sense that nowadays, I mean, no one is really willing to accept poor quality, or there is this kind of expectations that once a project or a program or a software or a service is delivered, consumers expect already it having a very high level of quality. We see, I mean, it's not news anymore, but of course, during the last 10 to 15 years, the power shifted a lot to the consumer. So they're able to tell already from the very beginning of a new product introduction if that product worth their money and their time and their attention, or it doesn't. So quality, it becomes super relevant. I mean, it's something that has to be there all the time, and it can really make or break your project, and you cannot allow that, obviously, especially if you don't have the right assessment moments, I would say.
Now this is very key point here. Also, it's not just from even the execution level as we go during the project phase, but even early at the start, if if the organization and the team who's doing the project is not doing, as you mentioned, the right assessment from the start, ensuring that all the learnings that happened before is introduced into this kind of assessment in order not to repeat even the mistake that happened before. I think this is also something that in organizations that are hugely massive and working in different continents, in different product lines, having that kind of harmony of knowledge transfer is quite critical.
Absolutely, and I would say, this is very. I think this is very key because it of course applies to big companies, big corporations that have tons and hundreds of thousands of examples. But it does apply also to the small companies, I would say. Even if you're a startup, I mean, the world we live in now, it's a world of almost open information, I would say, in majority of the parts of the world, which means that you can access a set of failure and set of success cases from other industries and other companies, and you should learn from them. Um, Now I'm thinking, I will not, of course, mention any brand, but there are some, we know, I think, some examples of software or services that the moment they hit the market, they didn't have a high level of quality. And I think every one of us can mention at least one or two. And this is, to me, it's very clear, because if you make it wrong, then consumers and organization will remember that. I mean, the market will know if you have a poor quality process in some way or another. An equally dangerous threat is that you come almost to the ending of your project lifetime, and at the very end you have quality gates, and then something wrong happens. This is like, I would say, really dangerous for a company, because the more you come very close to the launch, the more also the external world knows more about the fact that you're launching. Of course, if you're a big company, it's maybe a worldwide knowledge. If you're a small one, it's maybe more local, but still your relevant stakeholders know that something is going to happen. And if you need to postpone that due to a quality issue, they will also know. The market will know that you had a problem at the very end. And this is probably exactly as dangerous as releasing a product with a quality issue from the beginning. So quality is something that needs to be assessed very strongly at the beginning, but also you need to have um, constant risk assessment and quality gates to make sure you avoid surprises. Then, I mean, we are managers, which means that we have to manage if something goes wrong because it's always unpredictable, obviously. But the more you can plan, then the more you can make it happen in a structured way, the less unpredictable it will become.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. I think one of the key takeaways from this point from your side as well is that we cannot assume anything, right? At the end of the day, as you mentioned, there has to be a constant quality gates going forward from the start, making that kind of assessment and not just ticking the boxes that this is okay, but thinking clearly what we want to deliver and what are the risks that may actually compromise that delivery.
Yeah, and actually, the moment and this goes back, we go back to the consumer, and we go back to the initial briefing. I mean, you kind of need to have that sort of list of things that can go wrong, and how bad they can affect your success. And if something goes wrong, what is your plan to succeed to overcome that so that you can succeed at the end? So it's vital to have a kind of razor sharp attention to details and trying as much as possible to evaluate all the possibilities that can come and create contingency plans. I think that's also something that we all should be able to do if we want really to have a good project at the end. Nothing happens by chance. It's always something that either you didn't plan correctly or you just made a bad plan or you didn't plan at all.
No, exactly. I think all the points we've discussed so far is emphasizing that the planning phase, as much as tedious sometimes, time consuming, and takes lots of effort, it's key important because if this is done right, then the rest of the execution will go smoothly. There can be some hiccups in the end of the way, but if that part is done effectively correct and all this kind of issues and pitfalls is taken into consideration, you will have on a regular basis a more smooth process when it comes to the development and the launch itself.
Yes, and you will always have a guiding star to go back to. So the more you are close to your consumers, you have clear in mind why you are doing that project or that product or service, and you are able to transfer it in the requirement phase. You will always know what is that you want to achieve at the very end, and this will guide you in the toughest decision. I mean, if you have a decision on quality, a decision on cost, you will always remember what is the reason you're doing that project, and that's the one that should drive you in making the decision across the whole process.
I fully agree with you, Andrea. I think one of the key points here is that sometimes when you go and ask some of the product managers in different industries, why are you doing this project? Sometimes the answer is only more on the financial part, but the financial result will come at the end of the day if we have the right reasons why we're doing this. It's not just because of the growth, but because of the experience we're giving the consumer, the benefit we're adding there. And as you mentioned, this is where everything has to start. If that start is defined clearly, that these are the benefits we want to deliver, these are the requirements we need for the product, this will be a key successful launch that will deliver the financials at the end of the day. But if it always starts with the financial part only and the consumer comes second, then it becomes a problem, and then you don't know what are you going to compromise on because
No,
you don't
exactly.
have clarity on the requirements part.
Exactly. At the end of the day, it's more and more a choice. No, consumers choice. They choose to be with you as a company. So you need to give them the right choice. There is plenty of competition, though there are plenty of alternatives. So it's really a decision from a consumer to be with you, and you need to make it clear, and it has to be clear throughout the process. So at the end of the day, if you have a strong consumer foundation and a strong plan that has to be backed up with strong financial, obviously, then your financial will kind of be delivered.
Exactly, exactly. So we moved from the start consumer centricity, requirements, costs, risk assessment, and then the development starts and we come before the launch. So if we're talking mainly about the launch phase, because this is a key also item that usually
Yes.
product managers sometimes miss how the launch can be. So you can have a very good product, but when you go to the launch, lots of things can go wrong. So the product can be quite good, but the planning of the launch itself may get messed up, that it leads to a failed launch and a failed execution in the market. So if we're talking mainly about the launch part, what would be the key points?
Yeah, definitely. The launch is another make or break moment, and you can have the strongest plans, and you can have the strongest planning throughout the process, but then the execution, it's always in the detail, and it's always a big part of your success. Um, Here, I have learned, let's say, during the years, that it's very important to value your time. And what I mean is, doesn't matter if a project is big or small, you need to pay attention to it in the same way. I mean, every project has to be treated with the attention that it requires. I mean, you spend time on it. You have invested your company and your personal resources in it. So it's something that you need to pay attention. You need to transmit this enthusiasm behind every project you do. Um, and one thing is the pride that we as product managers have behind the project we deliver, but another thing is how good we are in transmitting this to the organization, and how good we are in driving it to the market. So treat it as unique, even if it's a small one, because at the end of the day, success is built by the big launches, by the big projects, but also with the small ones that day by day kind of need to sell your story, the story of your company, and why you're there for the consumer to make their life better. So full attention on also on the small ones. Those are as critical and as relevant as the big ones.
I fully agree with you. I think at the end of the day, it's like, how to say, it's like domino effect, right? You can
Yeah.
have big splashes or big falls, which comes from the big launches you're doing, but also having these small launches or small executions, incremental ones. If they're done in the correct way, they will become maybe like a domino effect that will actually generate, maybe in some cases, more effect and better effect than just one big launch. So it's not just about having big project, small project. There has to be consistency also in the execution part.
You're absolutely right, and you said the right word. I mean, consistency is clearly the key. I mean, consistency in how you treat your projects, how you treat your portfolio, is very key. And actually, I was thinking about another thing, that the more we do projects and the more we let's say provide to the market with new alternatives and new offers and new services and products, our portfolio um, goes, I mean, increases obviously, and it kind of needs to make sense. So the moment you are delivering a new project, you're bringing a new project to the market, you always have in mind, how is your portfolio looking like? How am I changing? You cannot add products and services to the infinite, right? It will become too much at a certain point. So you always need to have in mind, I'm adding something now to the market, but what am I taking out? What am I substituting this project with? I mean, what is going in phase out, or what is going out of the market because this new things is coming in? And I can tell you, I mean, for a project manager, product manager, that's the hardest part, because we kind of all feel an emotional attachment to our projects, because we spend time on them, and we it's part of our creative effort. So ideally, we would not like to remove everything from the market, but we kind of need to do that because we need to keep in mind the portfolio. Um, and I like the idea of, you need to kind of kill your heroes, so to speak, if you want to create new ones. You cannot keep living in the past, so always have your portfolio under control and know what are you adding and what are you taking back, because it always need to make sense.
No, it's very good. I think, as you mentioned, there are 2 points to link here as well. That you cannot treat the project at just phase in, phase out. It has to be building, as you mentioned, the excitement part and the enthusiasm. But I think also when we look at the different organizations and the different product line, different industries, and also we look at the team executing on the ground, sometimes, as you mentioned, they get more attached to the existing products because they're doing so good in the market, and we always have the fear of change. So what if the new product doesn't sell as much good? What if it becomes more difficult for me? So as you mentioned, building the excitement, the enthusiasm of the organization, and having that alignment with the team that having something new is also good because we're enhancing the experience, we're delivering more on the consumer requirements, would make this kind of transition and killing the heroes that you currently have and having a life cycle is easier for the team as well.
Yeah, and enthusiasm here. You mentioned enthusiasm is the key. As you said, I mean, if we get then go in the last part of the funnel. So if we go then to sales or how this project is close to consumers, then we kind of need to pass the fact the feeling that the new one is coming to replace the old one, and it's for the better. So even though the old product or service have been selling super well and it has been really successful, but hey, look at what we've done. We have understood even better the consumer. We have made a super clear project requirement list. We kept the cost under control and we deliver the best quality. So the next product that I'm bringing to the market is going to be even better than the one you're replacing it with. Hence, if the first one was really successful for consumers, the next one will be even more. This kind of enthusiasm is what needs to be coming from the project team until the execution team, so that it really delivers the success. So it really starts from the beginning, and you need to keep the hype high all the way, so that everyone is waiting for the new project to come, because they cannot wait for the start where they can start really giving it to consumers and interacting with it on the market.
I fully agree with you. So that's in terms of the launch part. And usually, when we see any new product launching in the market, it's always about, so why would the consumers choose my products? There are so lots of elements, right? The requirements, having key features and benefits for the consumer. But I think always what the team, in terms of launching organization, is always doing is what value would the consumer put on the product,
Hmm.
right? And how does that translate?
Yeah, this is a key point. I mean, understanding, and one of the most difficult ones, right? I mean, because I would say in the past, or even now sometimes, but thankfully less and less, we were used to the cost-based pricing. No, so we have a certain cost of a product, we add our margin, then that's the price the product goes to the market. But this has nothing to do with the consumer. I mean, you don't know if this price is what the consumer is willing to pay. Maybe you are charging too much. I mean, maybe consumers are not giving that value to your product, or on the other hand, you could have spent your resources on something else that it's much more valuable for the consumer. Hence, we need to shift. We need to shift the way of looking at our cost structure from a cost base to a value base. What is the consumer looking for? What is the job that they're looking to solve? Hence, what are they valuing the most? Where should I spend my money from a company perspective in research and development to really hit when the consumer what the consumer matters the most? This is the shift we need to do, uh, because it will guide us also on what to focus our resources on, I think.
Yeah, I think it's quite clear as you mentioned. It's a value based. So what is the value equation here? Consumers always expect that they want to maximize the value they're getting versus the money they are paying, and as long as they see that the value is worth at least more than what they're paying, they will happily pay it at the end of the day. It's a high cost or high pricing or low pricing, because for them it's not just about the price tag, but what I'm gaining out of it. And I think even now, is with these kind of economic conditions worsening day and by day and day out, having that value equation into the mindset of the team, even from the start, what is the value we're gonna deliver, is gonna help, as you mentioned, taking the tough decisions. What do we cut? What do we keep?
And also because And I always refer to something that I remember my one old manager of mine told me: if you're not able to explain your values to the consumer, then the price goes down. I mean, if it takes too much time, if it's not clear immediately for the consumer why they should give attention and spend the resources on you, then it becomes a matter of taking the price down. So you're almost begging your consumers to take your products, and that's not something we want to do. We want to be excited. We want to be exciting for our consumer as well. So you always go back to the first question: what is the consumer looking for? How can I deliver it better? Then we're not talking anymore about the cost, because the moment you really hit the bullseye of the consumer need, then it's all about the value that you can deliver. It doesn't matter how much it costs. We've seen it in many examples during the past years in the tech industry, for example. It doesn't matter how much a phone costs to a certain extent, as long as they can really deliver on the consumer expectations and the consumer job that they're willing to hire the product for. Then the price kind of comes second. It's really a mindset switch. We need to, many times, we start the project with a price in mind, and then we kind of retrofit engineer all the costs to keep the price. We need to switch that. We need to start from what is the value that we want to deliver to consumers. Hence, at the end of the day, what is the price we put to the product? It's another way of working. It's another way of thinking, and especially now that companies are going more and more in a direct to consumer setup, also thanks to technology, but also I would say thanks to a different way the whole organization, human organization works. We really need to ask ourselves, why am I on the market? What am I doing to improve my consumer's life? And then, if you really hit that, the price almost doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's very clear. I think at the end of the day, what would you, as you mentioned, when you look at the requirements part, if we're adding something onto the product that's actually not delivering value, and consumers are not gonna be willing to pay for that, it's better really to replace it with something else and that actually save this costs, but also give some benefit for the consumer as well. So in some cases, I think that part of that big pitfall is that consumers are looking for a certain value, but we're thinking more of adding things that actually may not deliver that kind of value, and the incremental value addition is quite small, but it incurs the product cost significant amount that makes the
Exactly.
business case in the day quite difficult to absorb.
Exactly. I mean, that's precisely the point. I mean, sometimes we I mean, all the people working in the product organizations and the category organization, we become really nerd of our categories, right? So we kind of want always the best performance, the super tiny detail that gives us this additional 0.0001 in the rating that would make us proud. Now, how is this relevant for the consumer at the end of the day? I mean, life is not that sharp. So of course, if it doesn't bridge the gap toward the consumer willing for your product, then your this additional cost, it's worthless for the consumer, and we will never be able to pass it, and we will never be able to explain why it worth that cost. So it's really better to focus on something that consumer matter, deliver on the experience, be true to yourself, so to your company and to your brand attributes, and really stick to that. And you will be sure, rest assured, that consumers will be happy. You will have a successful launch, and your brand will benefit from that.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. So if we look at the discussion we just had now, so we started with six key pitfalls. We started first with the consumer centricity, being able to understand the consumer needs and what's the values we want to deliver, and then making sure that this is translated effectively into a clear brief of requirements, having all the stakeholders aligned, and then understanding on the cost level and being very realistic from the beginning and putting the right actions to reach that alignment part. And then, as you mentioned, the risk part, the quality, making sure that we go early on with clear understanding of the quality parts and making sure that this doesn't become an issue at the latest stage before the launch. And then during the launch part, making sure the excitement is there, making sure that we have treat every project launch and product launch with the respective needs and the clear focus that it's not just a big one or a small one. It's at the end of the day, it's a launch that will add more to your brand at the end of the day. And then the last part is regarding more on the value part. So making sure that whatever we're charging for the consumers, that they have to be understanding that what we're charging is something that they're getting more value for it. So at the end of the day, all of this puts more into the ensuring the experience part and delivering the 10x experience for the consumer at the end of the day to have that kind of successful launch in the market.
Yes, absolutely. It's all about really that. Start from your consumer. Ask yourself the right question: is it worth for your consumer and for your brand? And how am I solving the consumer issues in the best way? I always have that in mind. Keep it true across the whole project process. Pass this enthusiasm to your team. It's contagious, really. So the more you are able to pass this over, the more successful it will be, and the more your consumer will reward you, and the more your brand and your project will be successful.
Fully agree with you, Andrea. Andrea, at the end of our discussion here today, any last words you want to add besides what we discussed?
I really enjoyed this. So thanks very much for inviting me. And I think this is a very interesting guide we put together somehow, and it's really rooted into the consumer. I think this is the most important thing. Thanks again.
Thanks a lot, Andrea. It's always a pleasure to have you here. Thanks a lot. So, thank you everyone for listening and talk to you soon again in the next episode. Thank you. Hi everyone. If you like the episode and would like to follow up on the next episodes, please subscribe on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, or Spotify, or in any other application you're following up the podcast on. And if you like the episode, please share it. This was Saif Abdul Ghani, Product Innovation Expert, Podcaster, and PDMA Egypt Chapter Leader.